Hello YouTube, this is Bryant Tubbs coming at you with another video. Today I'm working on a sculpture that I've had that I made in the past, but I'm in the process of changing it because I'm not completely done with making what we call slopes, but I'm just moving on to some other things. Like for example, slope has a lower portion here, an upper portion here. It sits on top of the lower portion. And then this piece, if you've seen in other videos, it had what we call a donut, stainless steel donut. And it sat right in this position on this piece. We've sold, quite a few of these, but I guess you get to a point sometime where you just want to just kind of change up some of the things that you're doing. And like I said, I won't go away from that completely, but I'm going to start just kind of changing up and doing some other things. So I've been looking at it for the last month or so, just trying to decide on what I want to do with it, and that I want to keep it and then go ahead and sell it, or just use this base to change it up. So I decided to just use the base here and this base portion here, and I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to just take it off of here, and I'm going to weld it onto this side on an angle. And then what I'm going to do is take a third stainless steel piece and have it come off the top of this going up. So as opposed to just being two pieces, it would be three pieces, but just in different positions. So what I did was took this was the center of this piece. It was in here, welded in here, and then the donut sat on top of here, right in this section. And this piece wasn't, I just welded this back on yesterday because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it yet. So the donut sat on top of this piece. Inside of here was a steel bracket. So I welded the donut to here from inside onto a steel bracket. So I thought that I could just get my Sawzall and go behind the donut and cut that weld out and just take the donut off, weld that hole up, grind it down, and it'll be smooth, like new. But I had it in there so well that, like I said, behind this, the bracket is still here, and on the inside of the donut, there's a steel bracket in here. So now this right here is the bracket that went across here. So a portion of it I was able to cut out, and then there's a portion that's still here. And this donut is solid. It's solid. So I was trying to get my Sawzall blade in here behind this donut to get into this metal, between this metal and the donut, and cut the weld out. So like I said, so I can just take the donut off, weld that little hole up, grind it, and it'll be like new. But this is welded together so well that the steel bracket, this is this is eighth inch thick metal, and it was going through the metal that was on the face of this going into welded to the donut. So looking at it now, there was no way that I could have gotten to that weld because it's sandwiched between this piece of metal, the bracket, and the donut. I couldn't get to it. I could have been there welding cutting all day long. Never would have got to that weld in there. So what I decided to do, after about an hour, 2 hours, hour and a half, so I'm trying to get to that weld, I went to Home Depot and got a Diablo 9-inch steel, cutting saw blade. Cut it. And the next thing I know, I was cutting through the face of this metal, which is here, with the saw blade, and it wasn't getting to the weld. I thought I was getting to the weld, but I wasn't. So after about 20 minutes of sawing, the blade just snapped, it broke. So I said, forget it. And it was supposed to be Diablo's, thick blade for cutting thick metal up to, I think it was 9/16. But it had no chance with this. So what I did was I got my plasma cutter and just put it right up to the donut and cut it on both sides. And then I went as deep in here as I could and cut it. And since the saw blade had already cut some of this, it was just a matter of cutting it down the sides, front, and I figured I could take the donut and just start working it back and forth. So after another 45 minutes or so, I was finally able to get it to work loose enough. So I get my plasma cutter in there, and I tried to cut it, but the bracket was in the way. So I was cutting through the bracket and didn't have enough access to get the plasma cutter on the proper angle. So I ended up just taking that and having to work it back and forth because I could have gone up higher and just cut it out. But again, I just wanted to keep that hole as small as possible to try and weld it in as small as possible so that when I got the donut off, I could just go in and just put a patch in, weld it up, grind it down, and just go from there. But I just wasn't completely satisfied with it after I got it done. I mean, it was good, but I had a few high spots, and I didn't want to grind too much of the metal down to even it out because that would have thinned the metal out too much. This is a 16 gauge Core 10. So, I mean, you have about a 1/16 of thickness. So I don't want to be grinding it and get it thin. And then when it's out in the elements, I don't want any little pinholes or anything like that. So I don't want it to eventually deteriorate. This is solid. I like to keep our sculpture solid. Today, I've been working on it. And to get this piece out of here, I was using my air hammer and my cutoff wheel. So this is what an air hammer looks like. You just hook it up to your compressor, pull the trigger, and this just goes back and forth with a lot of pressure. And I was in the seam here, cutting that metal out, just like if you're working on a car, classic car, and you want to break the spot welds loose. You would just get an air hammer. You just go right through there. Oftentimes it'll break the spot welds if the metal is older, is weaker because of salt and whatnot, rust and whatnot. So this will kind of break it apart. If this doesn't work, we have another tool that we use. Let's say a drill. It goes on your drill, and it cuts right around the spot weld, and it'll break the metal loose. But that's another story. So I was using the spot welder, the air hammer, going right along the seam of the thinner metal, breaking it loose, because this is 11 gauge here, 16 gauge on the top. So I had this sitting against the edge of the 11 gauge, going through trying to rip off that piece of 16 gauge. But the problem was, we did such a good job of welding it, this was hitting the welds that were inside. Because on this front face, we'll put the front face on first before we put the back on. The back is, of course, here. And then we'll spot weld it in from the inside, from the back side, to keep it from breaking loose. Because we're going to put a donut or something on it with a lot of weight. We don't want those welds to, because when we weld it, if we don't spot weld it, we just weld it down through here, and then we grind it to make it smooth, so you're taking a lot of the weld away. So we just tack weld from the inside to give it that extra strength. So when you put that on, and it's there, and you have all the contraction expansion of this metal from the weather, the welds won't break loose. So what I was doing is I was going through, getting the spot welds, just going, or getting the turn to break the metal loose, and every time I would turn around, I would hit a spot weld. Then I had to take my cutoff wheel, which looks like this, and go in there and in between the seam and cut the spot weld. And then I'll go back with this and keep going up, and I hit another spot weld. Gosh, there's probably 20 spot welds just on this one side, and then about the same amount on this side. So it took me about an hour and a half to get it. I could have just taken the cutoff wheel. I could have just taken the cutoff wheel and just gone right up the center through here and just cut it like that. I could have. But what I was doing was trying to keep this like it is, and I didn't want to cut here because I would have left a lot of this material, and I would have had to go in there and grind the material out. So I just figured the better way would be just to get the air hammer and just go and try and separate the metal. But I'll tell you, my wife and I, we did an excellent job welding that thing together, because it was hard as anything to get it to come apart, which is what you want to do when you're doing these projects. You want your welds to hold. You don't want these little flimsy welds that when you're transporting it to a show or someone's house, you don't want those welds breaking loose, especially when you have something like this on there. Like I said, this is all stainless steel. It's heavy. And you have this heavy donut resting on a piece of 16 gauge steel, which is not very thick. So you don't want this flexing when you're moving a piece around. And oftentimes at art shows, people come up to it and put their hand on it, and they'll try and move it just to see if it's strong enough before they buy it. This wouldn't move because I had that steel bracket in there, bolted to the sides of this 11 gauge. It wouldn't budge. And so when you guys are when you're building your sculptures, you want them to be solid. You do not want them flimsy. And so what I'm going to do with this piece is, this is already loose. I just have it clamped on. I already cut the welds, and I just took it off and was able to lay it on the table and cut that center out. This is 8 inches wide. This lower portion is 8 inches wide. This piece weighs about about 24 pounds by itself on the scale. So what I'm gonna do is cut this down. Let me take it off of here so you can see what I'm talking about. Let me get it a little closer to the camera so you can see what I'm talking about. Now the way I usually weld this on, just going back for a second, I usually would have it welded from this piece to this piece. I have them welded together from the inside. And then I'll put just a small, nice TIG weld on the outside just to make sure they're firm. But on this one, I didn't weld it from the inside. I just welded it from the outside. It was firm, which I'm glad I didn't weld it from the inside, because I would have had a serious problem trying to get between these pieces with a Sawzall blade, trying to cut them apart. So I was pleasantly surprised when I cut the weld and it came loose, which was excellent for me. And so let me take this off so you can see what I'm talking about. All right. So as I was saying, this piece is 8 inches wide. From outside to outside is 8 inches. This piece is 8 inches wide. So what I'm gonna do is just take this piece and take 2 inches off. So it's gonna go from 8 inches down to 6 inches wide, all the way down. So what I'm gonna do is take my cutoff wheel, after I measure everything out, put my straight edge on there, just take my plasma cutter and just cut all the way down, 2 inches off. But what I'm going to do first, what I think I'm gonna do, is get my cutoff wheel in here against this outer wall here, against the outer wall here, and just cut this piece off, all the way off. Like I said, I could have done that on this front portion, but I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do yet. But I'm sure now, so I'm gonna cut this wall off. I'm gonna take this whole outer piece of 11 gauge off. I might do it before I make my cut on here, or I might wait just to keep everything solid and firm. So I'm gonna make that decision shortly. But like I said, I'm gonna cut 2 inches off, take this whole side off, get this 16 gauge off of this 11 gauge, take the 11 gauge, move it over 2 inches, weld it back to this portion. So that'll give me my 6 inch width. Then on the piece is going to go on top of this, which is going to be stainless steel, I will probably do it either 6 or 4. It just depends. Because the way we normally do it is when we're stacking like 3 things, like the piece reaching that you've seen before. The lower portion is, I think it's 8 inches wide. The portion, the stainless steel portion that comes out of it is 6 inches wide. And then the donut that goes in the center is 4 inches wide. So we just step down 2 inches as we go up. So I might do that with this one, or I might keep that top one the same as this one, 6 inches. So that's kind of where I am with this piece. I'm not sure what I'm going to name the new piece, but we'll come up with something. But the way it's going to kind of go, it's hard for you to really get an understanding of it, but as opposed to just having it sitting up here like that, it is going to be on an angle, going more up from the edge like this. And then we're going to have the other stainless steel piece come off of here and go up. We just have to work out all the detail on how we're going to have everything set up, the position, the relationship between this piece, that piece, and then the stainless steel piece. It won't be a lot of weld points. So wherever they touch is going to be welded up, you know, solidly, from outside, from inside. So it's kind of a challenge doing it, but once you get it done, it looks really good. So that's where I am with this piece. And now the piece behind me, this is a totally new piece. Haven't come up with a name up for it yet. Now the base is standing on, if you can see it, it's just a flat plate. We're going to build it up probably about 12 inches tall. Maybe it'll be tapered somehow. It'll be tapered. A lot of the weight on this piece is on the back side through here. This is center, right about there. But it's like a lot of your weight because of this and the position of the piece is back here. So whatever base I put it on, I'm going to have more base on this back portion than the front. So I'm thinking about maybe, as opposed to having it like my normal tapers, I normally taper it like this on all four sides. On this piece, say this is the top of the base, this is the back side or the left side, this is the right. I'll probably have the right side come on that slight taper, but on the back side I have it more of a drastic taper, extending out. So your right side, your front and back will have the same taper, and then the back portion, I'll probably extend that taper out further just to get the footprint further out this way. So if, as normal, when people come up and lean on it, it shows and whatnot, it won't fall. Or the wind blows really hard, it won't fall because you'll have a larger footprint on the back side. So whenever you're building these sculptures, regardless of how tall they are, like this one is about 6 feet now. When I'm finished with it, it'll probably be like 7 feet, 7.5, somewhere in there. When you build these pieces, you want your base wide enough to be able to support the piece, because you got to think about it when you're doing shows. Most shows we go to will either have high winds at night, strong, rain. There's all kind of conditions. So, and if you're not there, like at night, you don't want your piece to blow over if you have a storm. And the other thing is, you get children and adults that will come over and lean on your piece, or push your piece just to see how heavy it is, if it'll stand up to the conditions that they want. And you do not want something that weighs this much to fall. If it falls, hopefully it doesn't hit anybody, but it can be very embarrassing to have your piece fall in front of hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, because if this thing falls, it's going to make a loud noise. So when you're doing your bases, you have to think about all that stuff. When I first started out, I would always have my base around 24 inches because I just wasn't sure. And then after I started working with it a little while, I shrank it down to 22 inches. Then after I learned a little bit more about how these things, where the balance points are and all that stuff, I shrank it down to 20 inches. And then I went to 18, 16, And I have some that are down like 12 inches. It just depends on the piece, how tall the piece is and the weight of the piece. This piece, I'll probably do about probably 18, somewhere, especially on the back side, about 18. On this portion up front, I can have 16, then extend it out to 18 or 19. Just depends on, how the base is looking and that kind of thing. So again, we haven't even came with a name for it. Very tricky piece to make. It has weld seams in it, but what you really want to do is have enough metal to try and get this in one piece. So from the base around, one piece, and then you have to do your add-ons, your extensions and whatnot. I don't know what I'm gonna call it. I don't know, maybe twist or something. So this is the front side, and then it looks, like this from one side. Then it looks like this on the back, if you want to call it the back side. This can be someone's front. It just depends on what they want to do. And so this is all Cor-Ten. You see it wants to fall this way. Still wants to fall this way. Wow. So that's why I say you really want to learn your balance points and what the piece wants to do. The piece will dictate how you build your base. So that piece is telling me that the footprint on this side has to be wider than any other side, because if I push it like this, it's heavy, a lot of weight. But like this, as you saw, it was see, it wants to come back on its own. I think I'm gonna build this up just a little bit more. It wants to come back on me or on the ground on its own. So that lets you know where your weight point is. And with this piece, the weight point would be here, standing by itself. If I had the top piece on, the weight point would want to be more back here. So that's why when I had the top piece on, I had it here going up, because I want that center, everything centered right on that point. This base could have just been a flat top base. It didn't have to be on a slope. I just did the slope just because we call it the piece slope and it had the ball coming downhill. But I could have had this on a flat base, but all the weight would still have been on that point, as long as I had my center position right on top of that point. So that's just kind of how it's done when you're trying to balance your pieces. Let the piece tell you what it wants to do. And that's why we normally will build the piece first, stand it, let it do what it wants to do, and then we'll either build the base if we haven't already built the base, but that'll tell us where to put the piece on the base and how to put it on the base. All right, guys, so that's going to do it for this video. I'll probably call the video, "Why did I make this ugly piece?" The piece wasn't ugly. I mean, we've sold quite a few of them, but I normally don't put this in the middle. I normally have an open hole in the middle, negative space. But I just put something on there just to see what it will look like. And I really haven't taken to many like shows because I just didn't like the way it looked. So just didn't. If I don't like something, I'm not gonna try and push it on someone else. I'll just take it, dismantle it, and do something else with it. But that's how it is sometimes when you're making sculptures, as opposed to just letting it just sit and you just saying, oh my gosh, I should do something with it. Take it apart, dismantle it, just take it apart. And the metal is good. You have, as long as it's, like 20-year-old piece of metal or whatever, just take it, dismantle it, turn it into something else, something beautiful. This is the copper patina on here. So I take my grinder with a like a 120, and this just come right off. It'll be just like new again, because this piece is not old. It's just we went through our patina process and just got it, put the patina on there. So hopefully when you guys see it again, it'll be something totally different. But that's going to do it for this video. And like I say, on the next video, hopefully I will have this one finished or somewhere close to finished so you can see it. And then I'll be moving on to another piece. It'll probably be kind of more in line with this style. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do yet. It just depends on what comes to mind. Well, all right, guys, this is Brian Tubbs again, and I hope to see you guys on the next video. So tune in and just see what I'm doing. I'll give you some more tips. So the tip of the day was find your balance point when you're making sculptures. And even as you're building the sculpture, say, okay, if I put a piece, like I'm gonna do here, if I put a piece here, what is that gonna do for the balance point on this piece? And then when I put the piece up here, is this base gonna be sufficient to hold that weight in different positions? So that's all the things you kind of have to think about when you're building pieces. If nothing else, do like I did when I was starting. Make your bases wider than they need to be. Never make them smaller than you think they should be, but always make them a little bit wider than you think they should be. And then as you get going and start learning how this metal works, you've been to shows, you know what the wind is going to do and all that kind of stuff on average. You can start building your pieces based on what you know. But what I'm trying to do is give you guys a look into the future so you'll know what the pieces are going to do just based on what I do. So for the most part, an 18-inch base would be wide enough for most of your pieces, unless you're building pieces and you have pieces hanging out over here somewhere. You might have to change the width of your base. And when you're going up higher, you always make that metal lighter weight than the metal that's on the base. So like I said, this is 11 gauge, 16, 11 gauge, 16, but the piece that was sitting here is much smaller than this piece. And then the stainless steel piece on the top will be even smaller than that, in one way or the other, just to take the weight down. So again, those are just tips I'll be giving you guys when you tune in. In my past videos, you can go through and take a look at those. And I just give tips, constantly give tips, because I want you guys' experience to be easier than mine. I had a little bit of help, not a lot, but I had some help. But a lot of the things that I do, I just kind of learn as I go. I mean, the welding, I took, welding course and all that stuff. So it's not the welding, it's designing the sculptures and knowing what to do when you design the sculptures. Like I learned from a guy that your lower pieces of metal should be heavier than as you go up. I learned that from a guy. So I'm giving that to you guys so you'll know that your base metal should always be heavier than the metal going up. All right, guys, so like I said, tune in on our next video, and I'll either have this piece finished or I'll be working on it. I'll have the portion that goes here. I hopefully have that cut and welded up and maybe in position on here. And then maybe you'll see, I'll make a video on me putting the stainless on there and going up from there. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this one. And I'll see you on the next one. And as usual, peace out.